Thank you for sharing this with us. And then there's a really, really nice lunch, which a very generous family's paying for. So come join us at Blintz's. And then this morning we have a guest in shul. Besides the simcha, we have a guest in shul. There's an organization that began in Israel. It's now spreading all over the world called Hatzalah. Hatzalah is the Hebrew word Hatzalah means to rescue. And in Israel, these are the people. It's a volunteer organization of first responders. People who are trained to be paramedics and EMTs, equipped with those adorable little scooters that you saw in the front lobby. And they're able to get to scenes of emergency before the ambulances get there. And because that gives you an extra 2 minutes, they can save lives. And in Israel, this has been a tremendous boon to Israel. And what's amazing about it in Israel is that it's not only is it save lives of those who are victims of terror and victims of accidents and other kinds of things, but the volunteers come from every sector of Israeli society, Arabs and Jews, and Orthodox and non-Orthodox, and every sector of Israeli society is involved in this. It's quite an amazing thing. And it's been so effective that they've now come, there's a chapter of Hatzalah in New York and one in Chicago, and a chapter, and they're opening all over the world, especially in places where there's incidences of terror. So that where there's a terrorist incident, these people can get to the site quicker than the ambulances can and begin saving lives. So the president, the organizer of this organization is a gentleman named Eli Beer. It's an American fellow, made Aliyah to Israel, lives in Jerusalem. And he's here today with us, and he's going to tell us about the organization at shul. And then following shul, there's Blintz's, and after the Blintz's, we're going to sit and share a potty. He's going to have a talk about this organization, answer people's questions. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful charity. It's a wonderful cause. Anyway, so that's this morning. You're welcome to come and hear that. Come in, please make yourselves at home. Monday night is our annual event with AIPAC. AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Organizations dedicated to building a closer relationship between Israel and America. And our guest will be Professor Gil Troy, who's a professor of American diplomatic history at McGill University. He's also the educational chairman of the Birthright program. So he organizes the educational part of the Birthright program. A very, very bright guy, and a wonderful scholar of American diplomatic and political history. Will talk to us about America and Israel in the century to come. So please come. Monday night it's at 7:30. If you come at 7, they always serve a really good dessert. So come 7:30, and enjoy Gil. Then 7, then come 6:30 and have the dessert. Oh, 7. So come 7:30. Wednesday night we continue with College of Jewish Studies. This year we're doing a romp through Jewish history, a survey of Jewish history. And our guest on Wednesday night will be Rabbi Zoe Klein of Temple Isaiah, who's written 2 beautiful books about the prophet Jeremiah. And she'll be talking about Jeremiah as a character. And it's a wonderful, she's a wonderful teacher, wonderful writer. And next Wednesday night, Rabbi David Wolpe will be here to talk about his biography of King David. So Shoshi here reminds me, on Sunday afternoon, the collective of Jewish, actually not just Jewish, a collective of composers has put together a beautiful program about King David. Cantor Barron was the organizer of this. It's going to be at Stephen Weiss Temple, and you're all invited. I think it's free, actually. Yeah, it's David's Quilt. You have to make reservations, but if you come in and you say, Phil Barron sent me, they'll let you in. Okay? 7 o'clock. It's a beautiful program. Sergio's in it, right. As I say, I saw Sergio. Sergio's my musical muse, you know, so reminds. So that's Sunday night. So today you can hear about Hatzalah. Tomorrow night you can hear David's Quilt. Monday you can meet Gil Troy. Wednesday you can study Jeremiah. And Friday we have the Rimonim service, beautiful musical Friday night service. Oh yeah, now for Friday you're getting ahead of me. Friday is Rimonim. Then next Shabbos we'll study together, okay? And then on the next Sunday, not this Sunday, next Sunday it's the 12th. In the morning we're welcoming Rabbi Gershon Suzomu, who's a dear friend. He is the chief rabbi of Uganda. Go ahead. Ask me how there are Jews in Uganda. Go ahead. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, the Abu Udaya tribes. In the middle of early in the 20th century, a group of African tribes, of communities in Uganda converted to Judaism. It's a very interesting story. And then at the end of the 20th century, they sent their youngest, most brightest member to AJU to study to be a rabbi. And he was my student, Nina's student, worked at Shomrei Torah, spoke here many times. He is back in Uganda now, leading his community, has been elected to the Ugandan parliament, is a champion of civil and human rights in Africa, and wonderful soul. And he's coming to teach music to our kids and talk to us about his community. So he'll be here next Sunday, not this Sunday, next Sunday at 10:30 in the morning.
It's really an experience. Don't miss it.
Yeah. And then what'll happen is after he's done, he'll talk to us for 45 minutes, and then he's going to lead the kids in tefillah. He's going to do our tefillah with the Hebrew school kids, and in his melodies, in the African melodies. And that's how Jews ought to sound, I'm telling you. I mean, these Jews know how to sing. I mean, beautiful, beautiful melodies. So that's next week. Yeah. No, just him. It's a fundraising trip, and he's coming here because we raised some serious money during the famine, and he wants to say thank you for our support. There's a huge famine going on in East Africa, and over the summer we sent out an appeal, and you guys, Valley Beth Shalom, raised $15,000 for his community, and he wanted to come say thank you for that. So he'll be here. It's wonderful. That's next Sunday, not this Sunday, okay? Plus the GA is in town, but that's a whole nother story. All right, any other announcements I forgot? There's a lot of stuff going on. Just stay here. Don't go home. Food's good. What can you? Lunch and learn, yeah. Not this week. Next week. All right, what I want to do today is I want to split our session in half, if that's okay. And the first half of the session, I want to do what we usually do, is talk about the Torah portion. And the second half, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. Merv, come in. We'll find you a place. Come on. This is Rabbi Tomsky. Let's find him a place. Move over. Somebody move over. And this is my friend and teacher. Thank you. Thank you. Here you go. Seat of honor. Kisei HaKavod. A point of. We're going to take I want to take a moment and think about Jewish weddings with you. So, you want to come in? Bring the chair in. Come on. I'm doing this on purpose, you see, because we're building a new building, and I'm going to ask you. I need another $4 million to build it. So, I figure the more people we stuff in this room, the more impetus there is for somebody here to say, "Hell, take the $4 million, build it already," and you'll hand me your credit card. Think of the miles you'll get. That's the really good part. Okay. The epics of Abraham, the stories of Abraham, take place in two Torah portions, last week's and this week. So if you have a Chumash, go back to last week's portion, which is on page 69. And we begin last week, as we did last week, with Lech Lecha. Now here's the interesting thing about Abraham. Again, the Torah knows that you know the current mythology, and that you're expecting to read a story which has a certain structure. And the wonderful thing about this story, the wonderful thing about the way that the Torah is edited, is that it's going to play off of that expectation. Because what we have in the Abraham stories are two lines of narrative. And these two lines of narrative have a contrapuntal relationship to each other. They come together and go apart. They go back and forth. And the narrative switches back and forth. One line of narrative is Abraham as the covenantal hero. Abraham and his relationship to God. And in those circumstances, he is this amazing covenantal hero, this transcendent character of amazing courage and moral vision. And the other line is Abraham in the world. Abraham as a member of a family. Abraham as a neighbor. Abraham, and in that situation, he's a schlepper like the rest of us. And you keep reading, and as soon as you get the sense of, oh my God, what a man is Abraham, they take you to the other narrative and you go, oh my God, what a man is Abraham. And so I'll show you really how this works. It goes back and forth, and the reason I'm telling you this is because it comes to a point at the end of today's Torah portion in the Akedah story, in the binding of Isaac, where the two lines of narrative come together. And the air conditioning has just come on. Right on cue. Oh my God. So when you contribute that $4 million, I want you to get me a thermostat that works. Okay. $1 million building, 69-cent thermostat. Page 69, right? Vayomer Adonai al Avram, lech lecha me'artzecha, leave home. Leave home. Leave behind all that identifies you. Leave behind all that characterizes you. Leave behind your prestige and your power and your patrimony. Leave behind your American Express card. Leave it all at home. I want you to enter this new world as if you were beginning all over again. I want you to come into this new world naked. And why? Because I'm going to remake you. Because I need a hero in the world. I need someone to stand as a vessel of divine blessing in the world. I'll make of you a great nation. I'm on page 70 at the top. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great. Ve'ata heyeh bracha. You will be my blessing. You will be a blessing to the world on my behalf. God makes a very startling confession. I can't do this alone. God can create universes. God can create galaxies. God can create dinosaurs. God can't create human souls alone. God says, I need a partner. I need somebody in the world. I need someone who is in the world and of the world in order to shape the lives of human beings. Abraham, you'll be my guy. Right? Heyeh bracha, be a vessel of divine blessing for me. It's an exalted thing. It's an exalted thing, right? I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. You'll walk around with my imprimatur. And in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. What a remark! And you say to yourself, oh my God, remarkable. Here is the covenantal hero. And what does he do? This man of transcending courage, he does it. He went forth. He picks himself up, takes his family, leaves Haran, leaves civilization, and follows this divine vision. When they arrive at the land of Canaan, he went through the whole land. I'm on page 70 now, 2. And the Lord appeared to him and said, I'm giving you this land. And he built an altar there. From there he moved to Bethel. And he invoked the Lord by name, and he went to the Negev. And that's where the first chapter of the narrative stops. And you're breathless. My God, what a man. He is God's God. And then the next chapter, that's verse 10 on page 72. There was a famine in the land. That happens a lot in Israel because there's no rain, because there's no river. And if you have an area that's not irrigated by a river, you're going to get famines. It's like California, right? Like LA. Israel has a river. It's called the Jordan. LA has a river called the Los Angeles River. They have about the same prestige, you know? I mean, it's a puddle. It's a gully. It's a nebuch, you know, right? It's terrible. It's a nebuch, you know. Michael, row your boat ashore. You'd have a hard time rowing your boat across the Jordan River, because by the time you put the boat in the river, you're already out of the river. It's nebuch. It's a, you know. But so you're depending on rainfall, and because you're depending on rainfall, there are going to be years of famine. So where do you go in a year of famine? You go to where there's food. And where is there food? Where there's a river. And where is there a river close by? Egypt. So here he was told, go to this land. I will make you a blessing. I'll protect you. Remember all that stuff in the previous paragraph? But as soon as there's a famine in the land, Abraham went down to Egypt. What do you mean he went down? He was told to go to this land and stay there. He was given that land. Why are you going to Egypt? Because he's hungry. Yes, hunger is a existential, theological vision, moral courage. That's important. Lunch is important. He's hungry. You go to Egypt. You don't know how long this thing's going to last. You don't want to starve to death. So suddenly, instead of this remarkable hero of theological vision, you end up with a very practical person who's dealing with the exigencies of life. So what happened? And it's worse. Wait, it gets worse, as they say. He went down to Egypt to sojourn there for there famine was severe. And he's about to enter Egypt. He says to his wife, now she plays a really interesting role in the narrative. She's quiet. She doesn't talk. She only talks once in the whole narrative. But and she's always sort of the object of his visions. She's one of these wives that like goes along, right? And here this is gonna get dangerous for her, right? She goes along and he doesn't see her. He doesn't see her. Look what he says. I know what a beautiful woman you are. That's nice, right? Right? Hinena yadati ki isha yafet mareat. Right? If the Egyptians see you and think she's his wife, they'll kill me and let you live. Say that you're my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and I may remain alive thanks to you. Now wait a minute. Now wait a minute. If you say that you're my wife, they'll want to kill me and take you, right? But if you say that you're my sister, I'll be okay. They'll still take you. Either way, you end up took. You get the picture? I thought this was a man of transcending theological courage. I thought, wherever you go, I will bless you and I'll make you a great nation. And right, but now you get a man who is terrified. It's not that. That's coming. I mean, that's you're jumping ahead of me here. But there's something very small about him in this moment. Do you feel it? And I think it's on purpose. I think that what we have are the narratives are playing off of each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I know I probably said this before. But
So I've said all this before. Go ahead.
all right. But I think you have to take a wider picture of Abraham, the Lech Lecha story.
Yeah.
But the Lech Lecha story doesn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
Terah is told to go to Canaan. He's going to go to Canaan.
He's not told. He goes.
He's going to go to Canaan.
The father.
He ends up staying in Canaan.
Yeah. He stops halfway.
And Abraham basically is living out his father's wish.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ascribe it to God.
Yeah.
This is the son carrying out the wish of his father.
Right.
His father wanted to go. Abraham is going to pick up where Terah left off, and he's going to go. This is part of the narrative that you have to look at in a holistic way.
Yeah. He's continuing the family journey.
You can take God out of it.
No, don't take God out of it. It's more fun this way. Well, because then the question is, why does he leave Haran? I mean, Haran was a good. Why would you go to Canaan if you live in Ur of the Chaldees? That's like leaving LA, leaving Paris, leaving London to go and live in Modesto. Yeah, I mean, it's, Fresno. I want the exciting life. I'm leaving San Francisco to live in Fresno. Something like that. Yeah. No, I mean, and it's worse than Fresno. I mean, because it wasn't the civilized place. You'll see that in a minute.
You can rationalize any way you want.
I sure can. Yeah.
But I mean, the fact is that Terah was going to Canaan.
Yeah, all right, I got
for a
that.
reason.
Well, we don't know the reason. That's the problem.
That is, we don't know the
All
reason.
right.
So he's going to carry
He's carrying forward the father's journey. That's true. All right, let's go back to Egypt. Ready? I'm on verse 14, page 73. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw a very beautiful, the woman was Pharaoh's courtiers. So, like, all of a sudden, this guy from the hinterland shows up, and Pharaoh, he catches the eye of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to the palace. Right? Now, what the Torah leaves out conveniently is what happened to her. I mean, so here she is in the palace, and presumably the Pharaoh wants her. So there's what happened there? It's a very ugly scene here, because this is Abraham at his smallest. Because of his fear, she ends up and then here's Mel's point, and because of her, it went well with Abraham. So you should go, Yeah, I mean, what? And he acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male and female slaves, she-asses, and camel. He pimped his old lady. I mean, he sells her to the Pharaoh. What kind of guy does this? I mean, where is your assurance? Why are you there anyway? And where is your assurance of blessing and protection? So there's something missing in this man, you see. And then the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarah, wife of Abram. Now that, you can imagine the midrash on that one, right? Name the plagues, okay? And it's got to be something having to do, so the point is that it has to prevent Pharaoh from having relations with Sarah, right? So, yeah, and this is before Viagra is invented. So you get there's something like this, yeah, something's going on. So Pharaoh sent to Abraham and he said, what did you do? Why did you tell me she was your wife? Why did you tell she is my sister, so I took her. Now, she's your wife, get the hell out of here. And he put men in charge to walk him to the border. Get out of my kingdom. Get out of my kingdom. And by the way, it's not assured that Pharaoh, they would have taken him. I mean, the fact is that there was a basic ethic that you don't do that. You don't steal a man's wife. But when he said when she said he was the sister, that's a whole different kind of thing. So he goes up back into Israel, and now you're going to have the separation from his nephew Lot, okay? And if you'll turn the page, the next thing that happens is a great war against kings where he has to go rescue his nephew, okay? So he has this ne'er-do-well nephew who keeps getting himself in trouble. Lot has to be rescued several times in the Bible. And Abram has to go to war with this whole bunch of kings in order to save his nephew. And then if you'll turn to page 82, now we're going to switch to the other narrative. We're going to switch back to the covenantal narrative. In chapter 15, sometime later, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, and he said, fear not, Avram, I am a shield to you. You know how in the bracha it's Magen Avraham. This is where it comes from. Anochi Magen lecha, right? Or lach, right? Your reward shall be great. Abram said, what can you give me, seeing that I shall die childless? So God says, I'm going to give you everything you want. And he says, I don't want everything. I just want a kid. I want one son, right? One child who I can pass on my estate to. Okay, Abram said, since you've granted me no offspring, my steward will be my heir. The tradition was you gave it to the senior member of the household. The word of the Lord came to him and said, that one shall not be your heir, one but your own issue. He took him outside and said, look toward the heaven and count the stars. If you're able to count them, so shall your offspring be. So Abram says, look, I just want one kid. God says, oh, you'll get the whole thing. I don't want all of that. I just want one, one kid, right? And then they have there's an amazing scene of a dream with a covenant in the dream. And this is the reiteration of the covenant. He takes all these animals, he cuts them in half. He sees this vision of a torch pass between them. And the blessing ends on page 85. You shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a ripe old age. They'll return here. They'll be in Egypt for some time and they'll come back. It's interesting that what happens in Abraham's own experience is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen to his children. They're going to go into Egypt. They're going to be violated in Egypt. They will come out of Egypt. They will fight a war against the Canaanites. Same stuff that just happened to Abram. And they will settle in this land. And you have the exalted covenantal promise here, right? So you go from the exalted covenantal narrative to the narrative of Abraham as a very small, fearful man, back to the covenantal narrative, and now on page 86, we go back to the family narrative again. We need an heir, and Sarah's having trouble. So what do? You give him the maid. Please don't try this at home. It didn't work for him, by the way. Yeah, it didn't work for Arnold. It won't work for you. Take Hagar, and Abram, again, now you read the narrative, and you're waiting for him to respond to his wife. You're waiting for him to see her. Right? Look on page 86. Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Sarah said to Abram, look, the Lord has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid. Perhaps I shall have a son. And look at the next line. And Abraham heeded Sarah's request. There's no like, honey, I love you, you know? There's no, and if you want to see the contrast, we could look it up quickly, but it'll take a while. If you read, this story is the Haftarah that we read. This is the Torah reading for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. The Haftarah, the prophetic section, is the story of the birth of the prophet Samuel. And in that story, you have the same thing. You have a woman who's having trouble giving birth. She says to her husband, I'm having trouble giving birth. He says to her, I don't need you to give birth. I love you more than 10 sons. His name is Elkanah. He's like the best husband in the whole Bible. You expect Abraham to be that. He doesn't say anything to her. He doesn't see her. She's invisible to him. And once again, you get this depressing idea that this small man, he hasn't grown into this, he hasn't grown any. Transcendent vision, family tsuras. Transcendent theological courage, small family problems. And then you got the problem of once Hagar gets pregnant, you have the mistress of the household who is barren and the maid who is pregnant, and they're going to have problems, and she throws the kid out and they bring the kid back. Turn to page 89. And now we go back to the covenantal narrative. You following the pattern here? Yeah. Right? Abraham was 99 years old, and the Lord said, I am El Shaddai, walk in my ways and be blameless, and I will establish my covenant with you. So this is the alternation. And it goes all the way through to the end of the story. So now I'm going to take you all the way to the end. I want to leave a little time at the end for this other thing. We have Isaac is born, Ishmael is cast out of the household, and the whole narrative comes down to this one. Page 117, which is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. So you go back and forth between the narrative of covenant, in which God keeps assuring him that he's going to be the father of great nations and have innumerable offspring, and he's blessed, and he's to be the vessel of blessing. And you have the narrative of family, in which Abraham fails again and again and again to recognize his wife, to recognize his child. He sends the kid out in the desert to die. I mean, you keep feeling like, oh, why? Why did you do that? And they keep coming, they keep following each other, one after the other, and then finally they come together in this story. The narrative of the covenant and the narrative of the family, or the narrative of Abraham as a private person, come together in the story of the Akedah, of the binding. Yeah, please.
Why was Abraham given more leeway than Moses? Because when Moses struck the rock and disobeyed God,
Yeah.
he wasn't allowed to go to the land of Israel. But when Abraham disobeyed God,
Well, he doesn't disobey. Where does he disobey God?
well, he ends up having the child with Hagar.
No, but that's not disobeying God. God said, you will have an heir of your own issue. Didn't say which woman, which wife.
Oh, okay, so he just kind of...
I'm telling you, don't try this at home. But I mean, he's not disobeying God. What happens is the angel comes and tells him, no, not that kid. You're going to have another one with Sarah. And Sarah, by this point, is 90 years old, right? And she says, look, I'm 90 years old. My old man is 100. This ain't going to happen. And that's where the laughter comes in. And God says, you don't think I can do miracles? You know, watch this. Whoosh. Okay? Again, it's not a sin, but you get a sense of a moral failing, of a man who doesn't see the woman who's right in front of him. He doesn't see the child who's right in front of him. When Sarah says, take Ishmael out of the house, it says Abraham didn't want to do it, but God said, do it. I'll take care of him. But what kind of man sends his kid out? I mean, and Ishmael is his firstborn. What kind of man does this? I mean, there's something's missing in him. There's something missing in him where he just doesn't see the people who are in front of him. He sees the stars in the sky, and he sees his thousands and millions of descendants, but he doesn't see people. That's how I read this. I mean, I don't know if you read it differently, but that contradiction is the contradiction in his character, and that contradiction is going to find some resolution here. God's going to teach him one more lesson.
Line 2 of
Yeah.
this chapter 22
Yeah.
uses the words left or
I'm about to get to that, right.
Okay.
Right, so if you take a look at this story, page 117, we all together? It's a very, very brief narrative. Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'eleh. The story starts out with a really weird beginning. And then, I always wanted to start a sermon that way. I want to get up in front of you all one yontif and say, and furthermore, or better yet, and my third point is, it's like, what do you mean? And after what? How do you start a story by saying, and then? Right? Elohim nisa et Avraham. God tests Abraham. And you have to ask yourself, what test? What kind of test? The word nisa, the word nes can mean a test, it can mean an experience, it can mean an experiment, it's got 100 different interesting meanings, right? It means a circumstance with an unclear resolution. Vayomer elav, and he said to him, Avram, vayomer hineni. Now they're going back to a very formal call and response initiation. Vayomer kach lecha et bincha et yechidcha. Take your son, your only one, the one you love. That's rubbing it in. Take Isaac, and here's what Douglas just pointed out. V'lech lecha. So the stories of Abraham, the narrative of Abraham begins with the words lech lecha, and it ends with the words lech lecha. At the beginning, what God says to him is, I want you to sacrifice your past to me. I want you to leave home, leave your parents' house, leave your background, your history, and begin again. I want you to erase your past for me. And Abraham does it. Here he comes to Abraham and says, I want you to erase your future for me. And the question is, will he do that? Will he do that? And here, the covenantal narrative, Abraham as the heir, as the possessor of God's promise and God's covenant, and the family narrative, because this covenant has to be passed down through progeny. It's not an abstraction. It's not a book. It's not an idea. It's a physical thing. It's a blessing that come together. And the question is, can you pass this test? Think for a moment. If he sacrifices the kid, what happens to the covenant? It's finished. There's no one else. That Ishmael's gone. If he refuses to sacrifice the kid, it's gone. It's gone. Right? And the person, again, who's missing from the narrative is Sarah. Right? And for a really good reason. Because if God had come to Sarah and said, take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and sacrificed him, Sarah would have said, they couldn't publish it in the Bible. Are you whatting me? Are you kidding me? I mean, hello? Right? No mother's going to let go of the kid, but fathers do these sorts of things, right? So here you get a really interesting moment where the two narratives come together. And the question is, you asked me to sacrifice my past, I did it. Now you're asking me to sacrifice my future. Will I do that? Yeah, please.
Interestingly, I had occasion to read this story in the Quran for Rosh Hashanah. I was getting
Really? Where were you davening for Rosh Hashanah?
in the tent.
Yeah.
It says to do
Service
the
must
Quran,
be really
and
boring.
the only other source I had in my house was a Quran my daughter had from a comparative.
Yeah. No, this story, yeah.
So I never read it before, so I did, but the narrative is actually very different.
Well, here's the thing. In the Muslim tradition, Abraham is the patriarch.
But what happens is that he dreams this.
Yeah.
He goes to his son
Yeah.
and says, "What do you think?"
And the kid says,
And the
do
kid
it.
says, "Do it."
Right.
Because and then from there
Right.
we show- so-
There's 19 different versions. There's a guy here in town. I'll tell you in just a second. The question is how this comes out of the Muslim narratives.
No. But my point is,
Yeah.
here what you're doing is you're separating the family man
Yeah.
and that narrative from the holy. And what I found particularly interesting in that narrative is that he saw his son.
Yeah.
His son was an active participant.
Yeah.
It wasn't him just blindly doing what he was going to do.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
So it changes the.
Oh, it changes it a lot. It changes it a lot. There's a fellow in town named Reuven Firestone who teaches at Hebrew Union College who wrote his PhD on the question of how the Muslim tradition reads this story. And he discovers 19 different versions of the story in Muslim literature, in the Muslim midrashim, in the Quran and all of its associated literature. In those 19 midrashim, half of them have Abraham sacrificing Isaac, and half of them have Abraham sacrificing Ishmael.
Wow.
But one of the themes that you're mentioning that comes out is that in the Muslim narratives, God says to Abraham, take your son, your only one, the one you love, fill in the blank, and sacrifice him. And Abraham doesn't know exactly what to do. And it's the kid who says, sacrifice me, Pop. That's what God wants. Now, if you listen to that, that's where you get a Muslim tradition of martyrdom. Martyrdom then becomes one of the principal expressions of Muslim faith, because he is willing to put himself on the altar. Now, that tradition exists in Judaism too. It exists in Judaism too, but it's never been the principal normative tradition. It exists in Judaism, particularly in generations where martyrdom had to happen. For example, the generations of the Crusaders. And you hear a lot of the same story being told. In the Crusader times, as the Crusaders were coming through Europe, wiping out the Jewish communities of the Rhineland, the prayers that they would offer was, Father Abraham, you were told to put your kid on the altar, but at the last minute he was saved. Our children weren't saved. For their sake, bless us. I mean, there's this kind of evoking of Abraham's grace and evoking of grace from God on behalf of Abraham, that kind of thing. You hear that a lot. But typically, that's not been normative for Jews, but it has become, in certain circles of Islam, it has become a normative tradition. And that's something that Islamic teachers are struggling with. It's very difficult, because if you set up martyrdom as a category, the question is, what are its limits? Judaism spent a great deal of moral energy trying to define the limits of martyrdom. Maimonides is an anti-martyrdom Jew. He says if you commit martyrdom and it isn't under a very, 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 very narrow set of circumstances, you're not doing what's right, and he limits it. The Islamic tradition is fighting that battle right now. It's a very, very interesting question within the Islamic world right now.
From my perspective, it was really, I didn't see the whole martyrdom piece. From my perspective, it was, I am now an active participant.
Yeah.
I am not a passive recipient.
Well, one of the questions of the text that's not answered by the text itself, which is something a reader has to fill in, is how old is Isaac? So if you think, well, see, that's one reading of it. Most of us read Isaac as a little kid. Some of us read Isaac as a teenager. If you have teenagers at home, you want to read this as a teenager, because you've thought many times about taking your kid to a mountain and binding him, right? Reading him as a young adult changes the whole thing, because it makes him an active partner in the process, not a passive object of the process. So all of those options are open to you as you read the story, because the story doesn't tell you. It's exactly right. Yes, please, Mommy.
To go back to saying, God said, get rid of your past, wipe your past.
Yeah.
Then he says, I want you to wipe out your future. What kind of psychological person do you have then?
You have a believer.
You have somebody with no foundation around, back and forward.
No, you have a person who's following his truth, his God.
Truth or somebody who's such a blank slate that
No, I think you have a guy who's following his truth. You have a true believer, right? Now, and the God. Now the question is he going to do it? That's the question. That's the suspense in the story. I know you're all sitting here in suspense, wondering what's going to happen. I haven't even gotten him up the mountain yet. But the question is sacrificing your past the same as sacrificing your future? Or is sacrificing your future the same as sacrificing your past? It's lech lecha in both cases. The phrase lech lecha are the bookends of the Abraham narrative. And this is what's being asked of the man. And at the same time, this is not just the covenantal narrative, it's now a family narrative, because this isn't just sacrifice somebody. This is sacrifice your son, your only one, the one you love, the one you named, right? This is dad. This is a very powerful, remarkably opaque, difficult, gut-wrenching narrative. This is a very tough narrative. You got to be careful with this narrative. Yeah, please, Bob.
There's a piyut that apparently was well century, his name Yehuda, Ben Shmuel, even Abbas. And he wrote in the 12th century. And apparently the Sephardim recite the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
And in it, Isaac is tied down and he says, take my ashes to his mother that she may smell my presence.
Right.
And how are you going to feel when this is done?
Yeah.
The rest of your life, how are you going to feel?
Right.
And apparently it's an argument for, between religious zeal and action.
Well, in the Sephardic, as I said, Maimonides is the one who comes down with a very powerful polemic against martyrdom, because he was worried about communities that adopt martyrdom as a normative religious expression, and he says that's not Jewish, and that's not constructive. So he's trying to pull back and I know it sounds bizarre to us to think that martyrdom would become an enthusiasm, of all the dumb things that kids do, right? But this happens at certain moments in history, and the question is, what is the status of martyrdom in a religious community? And at what point do you say, no, that's not martyrdom, that's egotism, that's something different, you see? And Maimonides is working on this, the Sephardic community, because they're dealing with oppression and persecution in various places, is dealing with this. It's a very, very powerful moment in the meditation on this story. Yeah, Doug.
Two questions. One,
Two questions.
is there anything in the Midrash that says, take me instead?
Who?
Abraham said that.
Abraham, there's a whole set of midrashim where Abraham contemplates killing himself. He's holding a knife over his kid. There's a second option. Child, ram, me, So he thinks of that, yeah.
Why is this read every day in the traditional prayer?
Because it's understood to be, because there's a bakasha, there's a plea, there's a petition that comes at the end of this, which is, just as Abraham was willing to give up that which was most valuable to him, to you, God, bless us too. Because of his merit, bless us. Because of his merit, bless us, right? Now, again, but that's controversial also. There's a question, what do you mean? I mean, what? There's a whole controversy about whether this story is normative or not, whether this story ought to be at the heart of a religious tradition or not. It's a very difficult story. And the Maimonides school of thought would say, this happened, fine, but this doesn't define our religious life. This doesn't define Jewish religious life. Now, in the Christian tradition, this becomes very important. The sacrifice of the child, does that sound familiar? Right? The Lord sacrifices his only begotten son, at bincha, at yechidcha, asher, you hear it? So there's a big question about, does this become a normative tradition? Yeah, please, Serge.
Just one general question about flawed characters. Was it a tradition of flawed characters in the other mythologies realm?
About what characters?
Flawed characters.
Flawed characters?
That, yeah.
Oh gosh, yes, that's the Bible's whole point.
I know, but was it also around the Bible
In mythologies? No, mythologies typically flatten characters into moral blacks and whites, right? Moral blacks and whites. Either they're great, great, great men who do nothing wrong, or they're terrible, horrible people who do nothing right, right? That's typical in mythology, right? That's even in modern. Listen, that's an American political campaign, right? I'm the righteous one. My opponent is irredeemably evil, right? Lock him, her up, right? Right? My opponent is irredeemably evil. I'm the only choice you got. We love binaries. Us, them, good, evil, right? The right people, the wrong people, right? We love binaries. Binaries make life so easy, so you flatten these out. The Bible won't let you get away with binaries. And so because part of it is this notion that there's nobody who's that way, number one. And part of it is this, because religious life is not lived in Olympian purity. The gods of Olympus, they get to sit around playing, chess all day long. Real religious characters have families, mortgages, cars that break down, right? Sprinkler heads that break, dogs that won't, that poop on your lawn. Maybe you don't, but that's my religious life, Oh God, But so the question is, where the idea that an Abraham, who is this religious hero, has to also live with this crazy family, with the wife and the girlfriend and the kid from this one and the kid from... It's going to get worse, by the way, as we get into the Genesis. You got Abraham, who has 4 wives, Nebuch, and 13 nutty kids, and Jacob with, just crazy. That's where you live religious life. That's part of the purpose of the contrapuntal narrative. All right, I want to get into this. Yes, please.
Is it possible that the two narratives about Abraham
Yeah.
came from different authors, the way you were telling us on Wednesday?
Well, I think that what they do is they come from different traditions, but somebody put them together. So the truth of the matter, I'm not so much interested in where they come from as the mindset of the guy who put them together, right? Imagine you're looking at a collage or a stained glass window, right? I'm not so much interested in where each piece of colored glass came from. I'm interested in the guy who thought he could put them together into a picture. So the mindset of the picture that's in front of me is the mindset of an editor who put together these stories and put them together really skillfully so that they alternate back and forth, so that at one moment I'm exalted with Abraham's vision and courage, and at the next moment I'm so brought down, because why doesn't he see? Why can't he hear? All right, let's get into that. I know you want to talk. I do too, but I got another 2.5 hours, and that's all I got. I have a kid I got to get married today. So he said, take your son, your favorite, go to Moriah, offer him as a burnt offering. And early the next morning he saddled his ass, took with him 2 of his servants and Isaac. So who's doing all the work? Abraham. And it's interesting, by the way, that he has servants, but he's doing all the work himself. I wonder whether Bill Gates pumps his own gas. Abraham's the richest man in the world, but he's the one saddling the iron and taking the stuff with him, right? And he sets out for the place God told him. And then after it says God told him, there's a gap, and then it says little number 4, and it says on the 3rd day. So there's a huge tradition of midrash and philosophical interpretation of what happened during those 3 days. I mean, think about this. Why doesn't God say to him, take your son, your only one, Isaac, and do it now? That would be easier. Being told you have 3 days to be alone with the kid. And imagine what those conversations were like. Again, if it's a little boy, it's a certain conversation. If it's a teenager, it's a different conversation. And if it's an adult, it's a different conversation. Interestingly, one way you could read it, if you read my column this week, I put it, this is the only time Abraham's ever been alone with his son. You find no other narrative preceding this one where Abraham even knows who the kid is. For 3 days, he gets to know his son. Really, and I mean, just the torture of those 3 days. So they get to the place, and here is the only language, the only narrative where there's dialogue, right? Abraham said to the servants, you stay here, we'll be right back. Abraham took the wood, goes up, puts it on Isaac. He himself takes the firestone and the knife. And Isaac says, Father, and he says, yes. Again, it's that formality. And he says, here's the fire and the wood. Where's the sheep for the burnt offering? Now, depending on how you read that, if it's a kid or a teenager or an adult, has a very different sensibility. Right? Imagine a cynical 17-year-old. You as crazy as mom says you are, you're going to do to me what you did to my brother? Right? You crazy religious fanatic? Or is he the faithful servant of God? Come on, Pop, let's get done what we need to get done. That's an interesting question. And then Abraham says, God will see to the burnt offering, my son. And the problem is that there's a comma in that sentence which doesn't occur in the Hebrew. Right? God will see to the burnt offering, for the sheep for the burnt offering, comma, my son. That comma is not in the Hebrew. In fact, if you read the Torah, if anyone here reads Torah, Yossi ever taught you to read Torah, you'll notice that the echnachta, which is the comma in the kriya, in the regular, is on the word beni, not on the word before it. So really it should be, God will see to the burnt offering, my son, comma. You get the picture? Right. So they arrive at the place of which God told him. Abraham built an altar. He bound his son Isaac. He laid him on the altar. Abraham picked up the knife to slay the son. And then an angel shows up and says, Abraham, Abraham. And he says, here I am. And he says, in the Mel Brooks version, it's like, why do you keep repeating my name, right? He says, do not do anything to the boy, for now I know you fear God. Now I know you fear God? What, all these years I've been doing all this stuff, and now you know? Right? You've not withheld your favored one from me. I want you to notice how many times vision is referred to in this thing. Right? Now you know, now I know, right? Now I know that you haven't. So when Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram. Now he sees it? He didn't see it before, right? And he went and he took the ram and he offered it in place of the son. And Abraham named the place Adonai Yireh, which is a really interesting, because it means God will see. This is the place of seeing. Interestingly, Isaac is going to have a malady. Next week we'll see this. Not in 2 weeks we'll see this. What's Isaac's malady? He's blind. Is he blind because there's things you shouldn't see? There's things your father does to you that you shouldn't see? On the mountain of the Lord there is vision. What did Abraham learn to see? I want to suggest to you a very simple idea, right? This story is a catastrophe in every way whatsoever except one. Abraham opens his eyes, and suddenly he sees the two most important people, or the three most important people in his life. He sees Isaac, he sees his wife, maybe he sees Ishmael. Maybe he sees the kid that he banished. He didn't see them before. Suddenly this story opens his eyes, right? And an angel gives him another blessing that you're going to have all these kids. He sees his wife and he sees his kid for the very first time. Suddenly he realizes that if you're looking for God in the far distance, you can't see the people who stand right in front of you. If you're looking for God on the horizon, the person who sits in front of you becomes invisible. And Sarah's been invisible the whole time. And there's a little hint to that, and I'll show you the hint. We're not going to have time, but we'll try maybe a little bit. So if you'll turn to next week's Torah portion, okay? On page 127. Sarah's going to die. The tradition connects the stories and says, as soon as she found out about the Akedah, what he tried to do to her kid, she dropped dead. Makes sense, right? And the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years, and Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Here's the next verse. It says, Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and bewail her. In Hebrew, it's much prettier, right? V'tamat Sarah b'Kiryat Arba Hebron ba'aretz Canaan. Vayavo Avraham. He came. Now, where did he come from is question. He came physically from Beersheba, where he was living. He came to be with her. It's much deeper than that. He showed up for the first time. He shows up in her life. Vayavo Avraham lisbod Sarah. Lisbod means to grieve, to mourn for somebody. Uliv kota. Thank you very much. Look at the word liv kota. Liv kota means to cry for somebody. This is the first time Abraham's cried, right? He laughed. They laughed when Isaac was born. We're 90, we have a kid, right? He worships, he has reverence, but this is the first time he cries. And he cries for her. Why is he crying for her? He didn't cry for her. He didn't cry for her when she was barren. He didn't cry for her when he took the maid. He didn't cry for her when he gave her to the Pharaoh. He did it again, by the way, to a guy named Avimelech, to the king of the Philistines. So he did it twice. He didn't cry for her when he had to take his kid to the top of the mountain. All of a sudden, he's crying. The first time Abraham cries. Why is he crying for his wife? The first time he sees her. Because something happened on that mountain. There's Yireh, there's vision on that mountain. Something happens on that mountain where he sees her for the very, very first time. And seeing her for the very first time, he suddenly makes an incredible realization. He makes an incredible realization. Now, watch what happens next, just for the fun of it. You want to see what happens next? I know you want to know what happens next, because it's too good a story, right? He sends the servant to go get a wife, right? He sends the servant to go get a... Look at page 139. Chapter 25. Ready? Vayosef Avraham v'ikach isha ushma keturah. Abraham went and took another wife. How old is he? A lot. Yeah. Kanai Nahara. And she bore, and Keturah, there's a whole tradition that she's Hagar, by the way. But that's okay, even if she's not. And she bore him Zimram, Jokash, Midan, Midian, Ishbak, Shua. How many kids? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, those are just the boys. Imagine how many. How old is he again? He's 136 years old and he had 6 more kids. All right, let's all do it. Kanai Nahara, right? Right? Kanai.
Was she Hagar?
Could be. Right? Could be. Could be. Okay? He has 6 more kids. He never talks to God again.
Where's Isaac?
We'll come back to Isaac in a minute. Why does Abraham get married again and have 6 more kids at the age of 136? He what? He tried Cialis? Could be. Tried religion. If this worked, men would come to shul. I'm telling you. Right? Right?
He wanted more heirs.
No, he doesn't, because he says that all the property went to Isaac, didn't go to the kids. He wanted family. He's lonely, and the man who was this lonely man of faith his whole life, all of a sudden feels the loneliness. The guy who he's a loner his whole life. He's a loner even when he's with his wife. He's a loner. He's by himself. He's this lonely man pursuing the truth of his life. But something happens on that mountain where he realizes that sacrificing your future to a God is not a true religious gesture. And he realizes that on the mountain is not the place where you chase God. And suddenly he has this need to have family. He has a need to have family around him.
So why was
Right?
he separated from Sarah?
Well, that's another question, but I want to show you one more line before you do that. Right, look at page 140, okay? This is the total span of Abram's life, 175 years. And Abram breathed his last, dying at a good ripe old age, contented, and he was gathered to his kin. And look at verse 9. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah. Whatever. Isaac and Ishmael? What do both of them carry?
Grudges.
Not just grudges. Grudges. I have grudges. You know, I'm angry at you, Darvish. Okay, that's a grudge. Right? That's a grudge. This isn't a grudge. Your dad takes you to the top of a mountain, straps you to an altar, and raises a knife over your heart. That's more than a grudge. That's an Amber Alert. You know. Your dad sends you into the Sinai desert to die of thirst and hunger. That's more than a grudge. What? These 2 men carry the memories of their father's murderous religious impulses. Yeah, I know, but I want to just stop there for just a second because I think that's kind of amazing. And yet, they're willing to come back and bury him. Why? What else did they got?
No, but Isaac and Ishmael, this is not the first time they were together.
Yeah?
Isaac went back to where Hagar was.
No, the other way around. No, Abraham went to where Hagar was. Isaac went back to mom. Here, no, it's right here. You don't have to think. It's right here.
There's another part of this thing that says he went back to where the well was,
Yeah,
which was Hagar's well.
it could be, but Isaac goes back to mama.
There's a commentary on that.
I know. There's a lot of commentary. That's true.
Sorry.
No. I've been pointing you. It's Abraham who goes back to Hagar. Isaac goes back to his mother. Abraham goes to Beersheba. That's Hagar's city. It's Isaac who goes back to Kiryat Arba.
Isaac went to Hagar and Ishmael before he met Rebekah.
No, that's not here. That's not here. Look, I mean, you can find it. Show me to me, but I don't think so. Esau goes there. Esau goes to be with Ishmael. That's next week. You got to hang on. No, it's fine.
Confusing the
You are. It's okay. No, but what does it mean that these two sons come together, number one?
They both have a common.
And what does it mean that they come together to bury their father?
They're better matches than their dad.
Ishmael and Isaac come together to bury their father. Even though they both have these terrible memories of what. So there comes to be some.
But they're linked together by that common.
Yes, they're linked together by that common experience, but there's some level of forgiveness, of understanding, of reconciliation. In some sense, they find them some reconciliation with the Father. With the Father. All right, I want to just do 2 minutes on something else. I want take a look. We're going to take a quick preview of next week's Torah portion. Right? Just really quickly. If we can do that, right? On page 130. How do you marry in the Bible? All right, so this, I'll leave you this for a question. We'll do this next week together then. Next week, Abraham is going to send his servant, and it's actually not named Eliezer, but that's what the tradition assumed it would be, back to the old country to find a wife for his kid. Okay? And then Rebekah comes and shares life with Isaac to begin the next generation of the family. Right? That's the origin of Jewish wedding rituals. You send your servant down to Orange County to find a wife for your kid, and if he finds the right family, he brings her back on a camel, and she falls off the camel in front of your kid. Next week, we're going to have the first example of somebody falling in love. If you've ever been to a Jewish wedding, what's the most characteristic symbol of a Jewish wedding? The chuppah. What is a chuppah? Well, the camel ride between the old country and the new country, the camel ride that brings the bride to the groom. The rabbis stopped the journey in the middle and erected a temporary dwelling. And that temporary dwelling is called chuppah. That temporary dwelling was the chuppah. And they imagined it as if she's halfway to his house and he comes halfway to hers, and they meet in a common middle. They meet in a common middle, and in that common middle, that's where they bond together. In rabbinic times, you would have a wedding, and then the couple would they would literally erect a tent, a love shack, a dwelling, and the couple spends the week in that dwelling. They spend a week living in that dwelling. You have the wedding, and the couple has the night there, and then the wedding feast starts the next night and goes for 7 nights, and then each night after the blessings of the wedding feast, the couple returns to that wedding place to share their nuptials together. We have this ridiculous idea where you have a wedding ceremony, and then right away we put you on chairs and throw you up in the air and make you throw up. Because frankly, after you've been through the wedding ceremony, like the last thing in the world you want to do is eat a chicken dinner and have all your parents' friends dancing around you. And you really do want to have a few minutes of quiet with the person that you love. But the purpose of the chuppah is to create a common middle space between his domain and her domain, which belongs to neither one of them independently, but both of them together. It represents the world that they create together. And that's the meaning of chuppah. Today we're going to have an ufruf. An ufruf is a German word meaning to call out. And in the old days, this is how we got invited to weddings, right? The fathers would come up to the bima and have an aliyah, and they would say, our kids are getting married tonight at 7 o'clock. You're all invited, right? I wanted to do that, but Nina said, 600 people come to Shul, Valley Beth Shalom. We can't afford that. So you're all invited to come and watch a blessing and have blintzes afterwards. But that's where the custom of ufruf. But the custom of chuppah is an alteration. It's a change from what you're going to see in the Torah next week, because I think it recognizes the same thing we just saw. It's not just her moving into his domain. He has to learn how to see her, and has to see her, and her inner life has to be visible to him. Otherwise, this is not a marriage. And so you create a middle space, which is owned by neither one of them, but the world that they create together. And in creating that world together for the first week of their married life, you send them into their their new lives together. So with that, I wish you all a good week. We'll see you next week. Ciao.